The medium-range jet transport detailed flight planning section of CAP 697 allows for very accurate calculation of time, distance and fuel for various stages of flight. However, great care must be taken in the selection of the correct graph or table. For example, there are 11 long-range cruise tables covering levels from flight level 270 to flight level 370, all of which at first glance look identical. The first table we shall look at is Figure 451, which gives the data for an en route climb. Figure 451 is split across 4 pages. Figure 451 on page 19 gives the data for EASA deviations of between -6 degrees Celsius to -15 degrees Celsius. Whereas the same figure number on page 20 deals with EASA deviations of between -5 degrees Celsius to +5 degrees Celsius. There are a further 2 figures 451 showing the data for EASA deviations from +6 to +15 degrees and +16 to +25 degrees. To extract the information for the climb, select the table giving the required EASA deviation range. Then enter at the left-hand column with the top of climb pressure altitude. From the selected altitude, move right to intercept the brake release weight, which is shown at the top of the table. Interpolation between the weights may be necessary. From the intersection of the altitude and brake release weight, the time, fuel, distance and true airspeed can be read. The order in which these figures are read is shown in the units column at the left. To illustrate the point, turn to Figure 451 on page 19. On page 19, enter at 30,000 feet pressure altitude at the left of the table, and go right to intercept a brake release weight of 60,000 kilograms. We can now read off the time to climb of 15 minutes, fuel used 1,300 kilograms, distance covered 78 nautical air miles, and the average true airspeed in the climb 363 knots. The data we have extracted so far assumes a climb from mean sea level. If the climb is commenced from another level, the fuel figure must be adjusted, as shown in the small table beneath the main table. Note that no adjustment is necessary for time, distance and true airspeed. Once you have understood the example, turn to Figure 452 on page 23. It is very often necessary to convert nautical ground miles to nautical air miles. Instructions for doing this calculation using the wind range correction graph are given at the top of the page. However, for examination purposes, it is quicker and more accurate to use the formula and an electronic calculator. Now turn to page 24. The next 40 pages detail flight planning data for various cruise profiles and flight levels. These are long-range cruise from flight level 270 to 370, 0.74 Mach cruise from flight level 210 to 370, 0.78 Mach cruise from flight level 290 to 370, and low-level cruise from flight level 140 to 210. Aircraft weight will reduce in flight as the fuel is used. Therefore, if the fuel in kilograms per nautical air mile is known, then the reduction in weight can be directly related to the distance flown. This is known as the differences principle, which is used in all of the following tables. In order to demonstrate this, we shall use an example of a cruise at a long-range cruise at flight level 290. Now find the relevant table for long-range cruise at flight level 290. You should have found that the cruise conditions we are using are shown on figure 4531 on page 27. Our flight has a first sector of 500 nautical ground miles with a 50-knot headwind. The weight at the beginning of the first sector is 59,500 kilograms. The temperature is EASA plus 10. The entering argument for the tables is nautical air miles. So our first task will be to convert our 500 nautical ground miles into nautical air miles. In order to do this, we need the true airspeed and the wind component. For long-range cruise, the flight management computer selects the optimum speed. Therefore, the TAS varies with the aircraft weight. We have to enter the tables with our start weight of 59,500 kilograms. This gives us an EASA TAS of 441. Notice, however, that this change of TAS with weight applies only to long-range cruise. If it had been for a 0.74 Mach cruise, for instance, the TAS would not change, and it is given near the top of the table. Our EASA TAS is 441, but we are at EASA plus 10. At the foot of each of the cruise tables are two notes. For the purpose of this syllabus, note 1 can be ignored, but we need to look at note 2. The true airspeed is increased by 1 knot per degree Celsius above EASA and decreased by 1 knot per degree Celsius below EASA. With a temperature of EASA plus 10, the EASA TAS of 441 knots becomes a temperature-corrected TAS of 451 knots. We have a headwind of 50 knots for this leg. This gives us a ground speed of 401 knots. Using the true airspeed and the wind components, calculate the distances in nautical air miles, using the formula we have already discussed. We have 500 nautical ground miles, a TAS of 451 knots, and a ground speed of 401 knots. This gives us 562 nautical air miles. Go back to figure 4531 with the gross weight of 59,500 kilograms. To do this, enter on the left of the table at 59,000 and move along to the column headed 500. This is the cell for a weight of 59,500 kilograms. The figure 4572 thus found is the maximum theoretical still air range that the aircraft can attain with this amount of fuel. This puts us at this point on the diagram, with a potential range of 4,572 nautical air miles. But we are going to fly 562 nautical air miles, which means that when we get to the end of the leg, we shall have enough theoretical fuel left for only 4,010 nautical air miles. We'll put this onto our table. Now go back again to figure 4531 and in the nautical air miles columns, find the closest figure you can to 4,010, which in this case is 4,009. This corresponds to an aircraft weight of 56,100 kilograms. At the start of the leg, the weight was 59,500 kilograms. It is now 56,100 kilograms. The aircraft has therefore used 3,400 kilograms of fuel in order to fly those 562 nautical air miles. Let's look at this on our diagram. We mentioned the footnotes before. As we said, for the purposes of this syllabus, Note 1 can be ignored, but we need to look at Note 2. We've already corrected the true airspeed for temperature, but we now have to correct the fuel burn as well. The fuel required is increased by 0.6% per 10 degrees Celsius above EASA, and decreased by 0.6% per 10 degrees Celsius below EASA. If you were doing this for low-level crews, shown on page 61 onwards, this percentage is reduced to a 0.5% adjustment. In our case, the uncorrected fuel burn is 3,400 kilograms, and the temperature is 10 degrees above EASA. 0.6% comes to just over 20 kilograms. So the corrected fuel for the leg would be 3,420 kilograms. Now try the same exercise yourself, but this time using Mach 0.74 crews. We'll keep the nautical ground miles, the wind and the temperature the same. Do the calculation and click when you're ready to check your answer. You should have come up with slightly different figures in the calculations, but the same result: 3,420 kilograms. This makes the point that long-range crews and 0.74 are usually fairly close. Table 454A on page 69 and Table 454B on page 70 are used to determine the time, fuel and air distance travelled for a descent using flight idle thrust setting. Figure 454A contains the data applicable to a standard economy descent, whilst Table 454B contains the data for turbulence penetration descent. Both tables are used in the same way, but once again, it is important that care is taken in the choice of the correct table. Enter the table with the top of descent pressure altitude. Read off the time taken for the descent in minutes, the fuel used, and, in the appropriate estimated landing weight column, the air distance travelled. We will do an example using figure 454A. Assume a standard descent from 31,000 feet and an estimated landing weight of 55,000 kilograms. Enter the table at 31,000 pressure altitude. Along that row, read a time of 20 minutes. 280 kilograms of fuel, and under the landing weight of 55,000, read the air distance travelled of 97 nautical miles. Included in the figures we have just extracted from the table is an allowance for the approach and landing of 2 minutes and 100 kilograms of fuel. The important factor to be remembered from this lesson is that great care must be taken in selecting the correct table for the climb, cruise and descent profile that is being planned. The remainder of the tables and graphs in this section of CAP 697 will be the subject of later lessons.